Good morning, everyone. My name is Beatty, one of the administrators here at the university, and I want to take just a few minutes and speak to you as our enrollment management, admissions, and financial aid personnel to discuss a few things regarding our admissions. Now, in the past year, we've seen a lot of headlines with Lori Loughlin and other celebrities who've been in the news because they were trying to influence their child's admission to college or universities. Some of these celebrities have been caught paying people, trying to buy their child's way into colleges. And so, as you can see, getting into a specific college is something that weighs heavily on a lot of people's minds. And there are a lot of individuals out there who work with brokers or agents to try and really help give their child the best advantage possible in getting into a certain type of college. For many years here in America, it seemed like only the elite, predominantly white, wealthy Americans were given access to higher education. But in the early 20th century, a lot of that has changed as we've started to adopt principles of affirmative action, and we started to actively prioritize and expand the emphasis on diversity in our schools. Now, affirmative action really is a holistic approach, a way to consider each student's application, and is really one of the best tools that colleges and universities have to assure diversity and ensure that those who otherwise might not be able to have access to post-secondary education have a chance to get a quality degree and thus change their life. According to NACAC, which is the National Association of College Admissions Counselors, there are a few things in their survey that people say that most schools consider as very important or moderately important in considering an application to their school. The first of these is the grades in a student's college preparatory courses and the strength of their curriculum. Now, of course, this is going to be coupled with SAT or ACT scores and also their overall GPA. Now, at our institution, that's going to be the same as well. But we also look at what NACAC outlines as their moderately important categories, which are extracurricular commitment, including leadership development, possibly some letters of recommendation, an essay, demonstrated interest in a particular subject, especially if we are a polytechnic-focused school. And then also some institutions will have them write an essay or look at class rank. Obviously, admission to different types of schools varies by the type of institution that's offering the degree. For example, a liberal arts college might consider something more broad and really give a lot of weight to essays or some students' demonstrated interest in a particular subject. Whereas highly selective colleges and universities, the ones who attract thousands of applicants, really might just consider something as far as specialized interest, or maybe giving a lot of weight to just a combination of ACT and GPA. But the interesting thing is when we start looking at college admissions, we have to talk about the two principles of equity and equality. Many of you have probably seen this before. It's one of the things that I really, really enjoy. But as you look at this particular cartoon, if you will, it clearly explains that these three friends are going to see a baseball game and they want to peeking over the fence. But what happens is when you look at equality, if all three of them are equal, they all have the exact same size of box, it does not produce the same outcome or it does not make it equitable and make it in reach for everyone. Where over here, on the equity side, you can see that, for example, the young man in the middle, it doesn't change things for him. He still has the same size of box, but his tall friend doesn't really need a box, whereas his little short friend might need a couple of boxes so that we have an equitable playing field. So really, equity and equality are sort of two strategies that we can use in higher education to streamline the admissions process, because equity is basically giving everyone the same chance to be successful and treating everyone the same, whereas equality is just treating everyone the same. So equality aims to promote fairness, but really it only works if everyone starts at the same place. And so in higher education, we know that that just isn't correct, because the students come to us with a myriad of different backgrounds. So equality aims to promote fairness, but again, we're going to try to have a level playing field by enforcing equity. So classrooms, for example, are made up of a lot of different types of learners. And so some people may need accommodations or resources. Well, in much the same way that we here at our university have a disability resource center to help alleviate those differences or those disparities, we want to do the same thing, and will continue to do the same thing in our admissions process. Because since everyone is different, we want to embrace those differences as unique. and we want to define our basic expectations for fairness sort of contingent upon their individual differences. Because in the real world, this means that people, for example, who speak Spanish and might need a Spanish translator, just because we employ a Spanish translator is not going to work for someone from China or Korea, because they need a Korean or Chinese translator. And so we have to look at what are we doing to help make everyone successful. Now, in preparing for this presentation to you today, one of the things that I was asked to share with you was sort of our view of the disestablishment of the dual system of higher education in our country. Some of you know or have heard me speak before about HBUs, or historically black universities. In our country, these came about post-Civil War as they were originally launched to teach and prepare individuals of color to be more successful educators, because our country in that time was actually promoting segregation. And so in higher education, in higher ed, we need to talk about desegregation. And is that really a remedy for segregation, but not equality or inequality in education? So in higher education, desegregation in the United States looks at the movement by certain states to disestablish that sort of dual system of higher ed for blacks and whites, and other desegregation or segregation issues, noting that there's a big dilemma that faces historically public black colleges, which may be considered or restrained in certain ways, and then also because of affirmative action and some of the federal law saying that we are going to desegregate because institutions who receive federal funds or federal financial aid need to provide success for the underrepresented populations. In fact, heralded as one of the major legislative milestones in modern American history, and as one of the most far-reaching civil rights measures ever in the United States, was the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which basically is saying the Title VI of that act prohibits discrimination on the basis of race or national origin in programs that receive federal funds, as I mentioned. And so we want to really take a look at that and make sure that we're staying compliant and trying to actually diversify our student body. Now, admissions, are we truly colorblind? Are we free from constitutionally prohibited criteria? First of all, we have to understand that in our country, in higher education, everyone deserves a seat at the table. And so we want to make sure that as an open enrollment institution here, we want to look at needs-based. We have a very needs-based emphasis. How can we help everyone? Now, some highly selective institutions are very merit-based. And a major Research One institution, for example, and they might be under more scrutiny because their standards for admittance, are they really granting needs for all? And in fact, in the recent Fisher case, in the past few years, you've seen people actually go through the legal system and take it to the Supreme Court saying, listen, I was denied an opportunity even though I was met the criteria. And so institutions have to be very, very careful. Is there an importance for all groups to be represented on the campus? Definitely. And the reason we use that as a background as educators is we have to look at the diversity in commerce, for example. What do Fortune 500 companies want from us as higher education institutions? What are they saying to America's colleges and universities that they need? Because they want employees who also understand their particular market, and there's a diversity in community standards and just in society in general. So what is constitutionally prohibited? Well, a generation ago, some people say we did it right. We passed civil rights laws that would prohibit discrimination. But special interest groups sort of hijacked the civil rights movement, and some people would say. And instead of equality, the governments started to impose quotas or preferences and started to set aside certain seats, and that's where we kind of get into the illegality of it. Is it okay to have targets? Absolutely. Quotas, however, saving a specific spot for a specific person would not be right, because the government should not discriminate. It must not give a job, a university admission, or a contract based solely on race or sex. They have to judge everyone equally without discrimination, but can still have targets to do that. So we have to understand that diversity also varies from place to place. And as a white male here in the state of Utah, for example, diversity on my campus might look very different than if I was to attend Temple University in Philadelphia, whereas a white male from Utah, I might be the diversity card there, or I might be the sort of person that would be out of place or looking different. So can advantages be given then to select groups based on past disadvantages? Absolutely. Advantages can be given to select groups based on things that have happened to them, because otherwise we would be a very homogenous society. And even in law schools and polytechnic schools and STEM focused schools, they need that diversity, because otherwise everyone's the same. We need a diversity of thought in America's law schools, for example, and that comes from past life experiences. And so we have to give advantages or preference, or at least look at some of the targets to those who may have come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And as I mentioned before, higher education institutions with a polytechnic focus or a STEM focus, there really has to be a balance. So race, ethnic origin, and gender. Fairness between the genders doesn't mean that everyone should become the same, right? The end goal is not for men and women to reach a complete state of genderlessness, but it means that men and women should be given an opportunity to succeed despite their differences. And so we have to recognize our differences as unique and celebrate them and engage in equitable practices at the institutions. I know as a teacher, an educator in the university setting, I have to really examine what I'm doing in my classroom to allow all students to reach success, or as a dean of students, what I'm doing. And I would encourage you as admissions counselors and financial aid officers to do the same. Because oftentimes decisions are made that when they tend to benefit the majority of the people without paying attention to maybe some very individual needs. And so instead of gender-specific restrooms, we could offer gender-neutral restrooms, and we've seen that trend across the country. Now, as I mentioned before, targets versus quotas. Targets are really focused on a variance of the demographic, whereas a quota is sort of reserving a spot for a specific person. And I am actually in favor and would support us continuing to reach for targets so we can diversify our student population, but avoiding a specific quota. So thanks again. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I want to support you as you continue your discussion regarding college admissions at our university. And I look forward to chatting with you soon. Have a great day, everybody.